Peeps, again I'm up on top of Castle Hill, which overlooks our lovely village, and as you can see here, you look around our countryside at the moment, the what should be fields behind me is where I normally go tabbing. Well, unless I've got an aqualung and a wetsuit, I ain't going out that way. But I want to talk to you about Agila, which Keith, old Let's Tab 59, mentioned earlier. It was the monitoring force in Rhodesia. Now, I got involved because I was in Tidworth at the time in the signal squadron that was in the same barracks as us in Jalalabad barracks. They were deploying out with a brigade. Now, the workshops for 66 Squadron RCT, what we used to do is we used to do a lot of their repairs for them, and it was requested that some of us deploy with them out to Rhodesia. So I know in the army they say never volunteer for anything, but there I was, 19-year-old, just coming up to Christmas, and I volunteered to deploy out with the signal squadron. Unfortunately, I can't remember the number of the squadron it was, but it was a brigade signal squadron. So we arrived in Rhodesia, middle of December. I'll never forget, it was quite a thing for me, because if you know anything about Rhodesia, South Africa and the apartheid problems, it was a big thing. I got to see the white man's toilet and the black man's toilet and the white man's bench and the black man's bench and everything like that. And some of the lads, just as a joke, turned around and said to me, "I bet you wouldn't go in the white man's toilet," which I truly did. Yeah, you don't challenge me to do something like that. I'm always going to give it a go. So I walked into the white man's toilet with my SMG, my submachine gun over my shoulder, stood there at the urinal, and suddenly this white Rhodesian bloke walked in. Stood alongside me, didn't notice to begin with, and I just looked at him and said, "You alright, mate?" And he looked at me and then double take and shot off out the toilet. Yeah, the lads outside were wetting themselves because this bloke came out like Linford Christie out of the toilet, because of the fact that there was someone in there that wasn't a white man, which you can obviously tell from my skin tone. But it always amazes me with Rhodesia, which later became Zimbabwe. Now the big thing was, as Keith said, you had Joshua Nkomo, you then had Robert Mugabe, and you had Ian Smith with the Rhodesian security forces. Now the big thing was, it was supposed to be about apartheid and racism and everything like that. But I'll be honest with you, we helped put in place one of the worst tyrants that the Western world has ever seen, Robert Mugabe. And I have to say that the British government has always been involved in various tyrants. You've only got to look at Idi Amin, again, funded and trained by the British government. Government. Saddam Hussein, yeah, another one, trained in Britain, funded by the British. Yeah. Gaddafi, old Gaddafi himself, another one. Yeah, whereby, you know, they're tyrants, they really were. And Britain funded these people and helped put them in power. Now, as I said to Keith when I spoke to him personally, I lost my Rhodesian medal many years ago, and I've never got it replaced, purely because I felt embarrassed about the fact that I was involved in putting someone in power that was a lot worse than Ian Smith ever would have been. Yeah. If anyone knows anything about Zimbabwe and Robert Mugabe, yeah, there's killing fields all over the place where those people that opposed Robert Mugabe were taken away and slaughtered. And I believe even today they're finding bodies out in Zimbabwe. When Mugabe passed away, I personally sent a message to the Zimbabwean people apologising for my involvement. Now, I know Keith has said to me that I ought to get my medal replaced, but it's a big thing for me. Not something that I'm proud of, so not really something that I want to stick my medal on my chest. But as a monitoring force, even though I was there as a vehicle electrician, during my time, tradesmen, it was always a case of you were a soldier first, a tradesman second. And while I was in Rhodesia, I actually deployed out with the troops to the monitoring stations, to watch the rebels come in from the bush. Now, I'm stood there with an SMG, submachine gun, and those in the military that know about the submachine gun, it was about as useful as a spud gun. If you held up a wet blanket about 20 metres away and fired into it, the 9mm round would hit the wet blanket and fall on the floor. Those of you civilians that wonder what an SMG looks like, if you've ever watched Star Wars and you've seen the stormtroopers, that weapon that they're holding is actually an SMG. So it's that good that it was actually used for films. But I'm stood there with an SMG, and along with the other guys, some had SLRs, others had pistols. We were asking the rebels to lay down their arms. Now these guys were coming out from the bush, with AK-47s, AKSs, RPG-7s, you name it. They were dripping in armaments. Not trained, they just had to squeeze the trigger. And as Keith said, there was a lot of negligent discharges, or NDs, when these things were handed over, because they obviously didn't know how to unload them properly. But like I say, it was a bum twitching time for all of us, because again, we're there really as a sort of peacekeeping force, a monitoring force, and we weren't allowed any rules of engagement or anything. Now, I'll be honest with you, if anyone had taken a pot shot at us, I'm pretty sure we'd have all fired back. But with us being outnumbered, because on each monitoring post, there's probably about half a dozen to a dozen blokes. Very little communication, and with the old radio sets that we had, they weren't the best. For us to radio through for a QRF or anything like that would have been a bit of a nightmare. But I spent, I think it was 3 months out there, went out middle of December, came back middle of February. And it wasn't a war, it wasn't a proper deployment as such, but it was my first operational deployment. At 19 years old, seeing these guys coming out and asking them to lay down their arms, a bit of a bum twitcher for all of us. Now this was in the days when deployments, there was none of this 2 years between deployments, and even today I don't think there's a 2-year period between deployments, because I know myself, back in the 90s with Bosnia, there was no 2 years between my deployments in Bosnia. But I came back in February, and at the end of March I then deployed with my unit, 66 Squadron RCT, out to Cyprus on the UN tour for 6 months. But like I say, up Agila, it's not something that I'm proud of. That's why I don't want the medal. And I know Keith was saying that they can go for a fair bit of money. I lost mine. It's probably still in the house in Portsmouth with my now ex-wife. And like I say, I deployed in '79 just prior to Christmas, and at the time I was going out with Irene. So that's probably why later in life we ended up getting divorced, because she wasn't happy about the fact that I was disappearing off for Christmas back in '79. We got divorced in 2000. But personally, Britain should never got involved. I'll be honest with you. That's the way that I see it. We get involved in far too many things that don't involve us. Yeah, I'm a great believer that things like that, ring fence off, let them get on with it, and then clear up the mess afterwards. But for me, it wasn't a good time, not something that I really want people to understand anything about. But Keith did a good talk on Agila and what it was all about. Yes, there was a Premier helicopter went down, 3 guys died. The other 2, I believe, and I'm not sure, I think they were road traffic accidents. But there was only the 5 deaths during Agila. And for those 5 guys, yeah, rest in peace, gents, and I will see you at the final RV. So that's all I'm going to say about Agila. Thank you very much for your time. If you're new to my channel, same as Keith, yeah, if you want to subscribe to it, please feel free to do so. We're not telling you to do it, we're saying to consider it. It's up to you. My next video, I'm going to talk about the rest of my army career. I think I left you last with the fact that I was at 15 field workshops with maybe 3 German farmers. But the next one, I'll probably do a tab out and talk to you about what happened to me after my next deployment. Not an operational deployment, but a posting with another unit. So to you all, thank you very much for your time. Take care of yourselves, and as Keith always says, let's tab.